Good morning to you all. It's 8 o'clock and a very, very warm welcome to St Bart's Church on this Monday morning. Today's a very, very special day for our church again, for today's the day when we reopen our church for private prayer. So as it's 8 o'clock, without further ado, keys in the door as you can see, opening up, open the door and in we come. First thing I'm going to do, if it's all right with you, I'm just going to put the lights on. I walk in here. Going to put the lights on here. As I walk in, lights coming on nicely, as you can see the notice board there. Please do look at it carefully. I wrote it, so I don't spend too long on it, but it's there for you to look at as you come in. I shall come along over here, empty back my hands, quite hard to do, and hold an iPad at the same time. I shall pick up a pen and a card and a piece of paper and go across to my seat, which this morning is set at the front of church this morning. See, lovely church here today. Walk in. Card and paper for later, goes on there, and sit down here. And so, welcome, great to be back in church again on this lovely Monday morning. And do please come and join us later. Now, I made a request last week. If anybody had any ideas about Bible readings we could have had this morning, we could have had, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock," Revelation 3:20. We could have had Psalm 24 about "Lift up your heads, O you gates." We could have had Jesus saying, "Knock and the door will be open to you." But I've chosen none of those this morning. I've just chosen the Psalm for today. I'm going to read you Psalm 27 from the Old Testament. Now, just to remind you about Psalms, it's the Old Testament hymn book, mostly written by a guy called David. Now, David's a great hero of the Bible, but he also spent much of his life in danger. As a child, he wasn't always a king. He brought up as a shepherd. In those days, they used to live out in the field, looking after their sheep, protecting them from those dangerous wolves and bears and animals and so on, so he was always in danger then. He's the guy that took on Goliath with nothing but a slingshot. Before he became king, the king at the time was jealous of him and tried to kill him. After he became king, various people tried to take the crown off him, including at least one of his sons. He was in danger within and without, basically for the whole of his life. So it makes it all the more important to recognize that David was the guy that said these words. I'm just going to read you the first 4 verses of Psalm 27. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and foes, they shall stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart will not fear. Though war rise up against me, yet will I be confident. One thing I have asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will set me on high as a rock." And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. And so, this guy called David, as I said, spent much of his time in danger. And he says these amazing words. "The Lord is my light and my salvation." When he says my light, he means the Lord is the one that helps us to see and to see things clearly. So the Lord is my light, he says, and my salvation, the one who saves me when I'm in trouble. Therefore, he says, I will not be afraid. I will not fear. Then he goes on to say, "The Lord is a stronghold of my life." Stronghold's a place where you go, a safe place where you go when you're in danger. And because of that, he says, if the Lord is the stronghold of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? So you can see David saying that God is his light and his salvation and also his stronghold. And because of that, he doesn't need to fear. Then he goes on to say he goes on to put some flesh on the bones. He says, "When evildoers assail me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and my foes." And he goes, "Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not be afraid." So he talks about people declaring war against him. And we've got to remember in David's case, of course, these weren't just idle words. These weren't just pious words said at the end of a good day. David really did know what it was like to be in danger. He really did have people declare war against him. He really did have people assailing him to devour his faith. It was a genuine experience for David. He actually went through it himself, and yet he says, "Because the Lord is my light, because the Lord is the one who saves me, and because the Lord is the stronghold, the place where it can go in danger, he did not need to be afraid." So here's this guy called David who knows danger and knows it well, but also knows that because God is with him, he doesn't need to be afraid. But David says, and this is where I'm coming on to this morning really, he says the interesting thing. He says, one thing I've asked of the Lord, one thing. And notice it isn't, riches, power, all this kind of stuff. It's one thing, he says, I have asked of the Lord, and that will I seek. That to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. So he says, the one thing I asked of God is, please, can I go into the, spend lots of time in the house of God? That's the one thing he asked for. And that's why it's great, because this morning, because we can come in here again. It's great that, but like David, we can come into the house of the Lord again. And there's two reasons why David wants to be able to come into the house of the Lord. And this is why it's so important to him. He says, to behold, to see the beauty of the Lord, to be able to remind ourselves just how fantastic and how beautiful God is. And I don't just mean that the lovely building. I'm talking about the fellowship. I'm talking about the worship. I'm talking about the prayer. I'm talking about the study Bible and the sermons and so on. So the house of the Lord is a place where we can go, and it's where it is for you. The house of the Lord is a place where you can go to see how wonderful God is. And he also says to inquire in his temple, a place where you can go for guidance, to talk to God, to seek God, to ask for God's guidance and God's help. And I suppose for many of us, St. Bart's Church is that place. It's been prayed in here for 800 years. And it's a place where we can go. It's a place where we can enjoy lovely surroundings. We can enjoy the presence of lovely people. We can hear some fantastic words. And we can behold the beauty of the Lord. But because we're open again now, you can come in and you can inquire of God. You can ask God. You can ask God for God's guidance. You can ask God for God's help. You can ask God for God's presence. And you can ask God to be with you. And so, welcome back, everybody. Do come in. Do obviously follow the protocols as suggested, but do walk in. Do come in. Do come in and be safe. And let's again, now we're inside, let's again behold the beauty of the Lord, and let's inquire in his temple.